Greetings, Rebel fans. My name is Jason Kelly, and this is the Let's Run podcast. I want to welcome you all to the show today as we dive in to the bueno. Did I say bueno? Sorry, I was just listening to something in Spanish. So, we dive into the press conference, the introduction of Josh Pastner as the head coach of the Runnin' Rebels. It's been a couple of days since we found out that Josh was going to be our head coach. I want to get into it. I want to go over what happened in the press conference, what was said, what my impressions were, because I was there. Indeed, I did even actually take a picture with Josh. As a few people astutely pointed out, if Josh knew what I have been saying about this hire, the process of the hire, and indeed, a few of the things, although I don't think it's fair to say that my criticism of the hire has been levied primarily at Josh. I think if Josh knew probably a few of the things that I had said about him and the hire, perhaps he would not have wanted to take a picture with me. But I kind of felt that it was important because, primarily I love running Rebel hoops. I want the program to succeed. And the person who's leading the program is Josh Pastner. So regardless of what happened with the hire, he's the guy. And nothing that anybody can do can change that now. And he's a person that has a legitimate resume. It's a resume that I tore into a little bit at the outset of the hire. It's probably one that I was too harsh with. But I want to explain that. I want to talk about, why it seems maybe people listening to this might think that I've changed my tune about it. I haven't, in some ways, and in other ways, I probably have a little bit. And that's just because I have more information now. As you get new information, you can change your mind and you can be wrong about things. Now, it's impossible to say that I'm going to be wrong about my initial gut reaction to the Josh Pastner hire because we haven't seen Josh coach any games yet. But Josh is the head coach of the Runnin' Rebels. He gave an outstanding, and the school put on an outstanding opening press conference for him. He clearly wants to be here at this job and clearly believes in the history and the power, describing UNLV as a sleeping giant. He clearly believes in the potential of this job. And so, as a person who loves the program, I have a responsibility right now to support him. And to put my best foot forward to make sure that he has the full support of the fan base behind him. Obviously, I'm just one fan with my podcast, but the big questions that I want to answer today are: you tore into this hire. Have you changed your mind? Why was I so critical initially of the hire? What kind of style is Josh going to have as a coach? What about NIL? What's important for Josh to have success here? What's the role of my podcast, the Let's Run podcast? And ultimately a prediction of what the next 24 months of Runnin' Rebel basketball is going to look like. Those are the topics that I want to jump into. So first, I guess I'll start, before we dive into the, who Pastner is as a coach, I want to talk about why I was so critical of the process, if I've changed my mind. And I want to dive into that first. So I was critical of the process of hiring this Runnin' Rebel head coach because clearly UNLV was trying to land coaches, whether they be Eric Olin or Brian Hodgson or Will Wade, because believe it or not, UNLV made as compelling of an offer as they could have to Will Wade that they were capable of doing. UNLV tried to that was plan A for the Runnin' Rebels, to try and get Will Wade out of McNeese State. UNLV had an in there. The AD at McNeese State, where Will Wade was coaching, is Heath Schroyer, who previously worked at UNLV. UNLV really went after Will Wade. After that didn't work out, they started interviewing. I mean, they were already talking to people beforehand, but they started interviewing dozens of candidates. It seems to me like they went after Eric Olin. For whatever reason, that didn't work. It seems to everybody, because it was reported nationally, that they went after Brian Hodgson, who obviously elected to go to a crappy program in USF over coming to UNLV. And the whole process, if you take into account the Pac-12 Mountain West stuff, all of the reports about UNLV's financial issues, kind of the circusy feel of this hire. I was very upset with the administration that they weren't able to keep their ducks in a row and keep their PR in a row. And you know, when you're in that angry state at the university, and you know, my podcast is bigger than I thought it was going to be. And there's not a lot of UNLV people online and social media. There just isn't. And so a lot of times, you know, me as a content creator and as really the only face that's on exclusively online, um, now I'm going to get USF fans angry at me. Well, USF fans can look at the record and the resume of that program over the last 30 years. I'm not saying that UNLV obviously doesn't have its own problems, and I think UNLV and USF have similar NCAA tournament droughts, but USF has been a miserable basketball program for a long time. And so when I saw all of the ways that this hiring search seemed to be going wrong, I was incredibly upset. I really was. And I take a lot of the UNLV is a broke school and can't afford anything. I take a lot of that kind of stuff because people don't know who else to talk to online at UNLV. Local media, they do have small online presences, and they do report, you know, like Steve Cofield, Mike Ramala, Ed Graney. These people do have online presences, but they're not like primarily online people. They do radio or writing. And so I was taking a lot of that. I've gotten a lot of people speaking to me at Jest, and I think that situation led me to be quick to anger, quick to extreme and extreme emotional reaction, and quick to really, really, really go after all the negatives that I could see in this Josh Pastner hire. Josh Pastner's record still isn't, you know, it's incredibly strong, and it's way stronger than a guy like Kevin Kruger's was, but it still does have some holes in it and some question marks. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't answer those question marks, but the reason why I tore into this hire had everything to do, almost everything to do, with the way that the university handled it. And not just this hire, but the way that the university has handled its PR over the course of the last few months. A lot less to do with Josh Pastner, and nothing Josh Pastner as a coach, and absolutely nothing to do with Josh Pastner as a human being. By all accounts, you know, the thing that got more attention, I mean, we had almost 2,000 people on my show when talking about the hire right after. And you know, I was getting a lot of DMs. I was getting UNLV is embarrassing. And I was angry and upset with the school. And so that's where that response came from. It really sucked to see Brian Hodgson, who I thought was really growing on me as a really good candidate, turn down the Runnin' Rebels for USF. That was really upsetting because I think UNLV is better than that. And it was reported by real people that UNLV was having some NIL issues, and that Hodgson, you know, was using UNLV essentially to get a better job. But I mean, it's not like Chris Beard using UNLV to get a job at Texas Tech. It's Brian Hodgson, who's, you know, only 2 years of head coaching experience using UNLV to get a job at USF. And I think that process really upset me. And so have I changed my mind about the Josh Pastner hire? Well, no. I mean, he wasn't on the top of my candidate list, primarily because, you know, he kind of, or Mick Cronin. Good point, Martin. Mick Cronin did the same thing with UNLV. And it's upsetting to have your school used as a leveraging tool for other people to go get their good jobs. And so ultimately, no, you know, the reservations that I have about Josh Pastner are still there, but they've been lessened. And let me tell you why they've been lessened. After my initial reaction, where we had so many people watching the show and I was on Curry Hicks' stage, I had literally more than a dozen prominent, national, respected people reach out to me on an individual level that wanted to talk to me about who Josh Pastner is, that wanted to talk to me about why his time at Georgia Tech went the way that it did. Um, yeah. Oh, yeah. And my mom brings up another good point why I was upset. The school also wasted $2.3 million firing Kevin Kruger that it didn't have to waste. Like, there's just a lot of reasons to be upset with UNLV right now with the administration. And did Josh Pastner get maybe an unfair part of that criticism? Yeah. But, there's a lot of reasons to be upset with UNLV. Anyway, I had literally a dozen people, strong, national, well respected, people with hundreds of thousands of followers, um, reach out to me to talk to me about Josh Pastner. That had either heard my podcast directly or heard me on Curry Hicks' stage, or saw me on whatever medium. Um, and what did they tell me? They actually told me that Josh is a good basketball coach. Now, is he perfect? No. I mean, there isn't a perfect basketball coach that exists. But they talked to me about the things that he did with his offense and defense in Memphis. They talked to me about how he used limited resources at a school like Georgia Tech, which is a very difficult job in the ACC, which historically, not this year, but historically is a very good basketball conference. They talked to me about the kind of X's and O's things that he did at those schools to try and gain an advantage. They talked to me about him, what he's done in the last 2 years to kind of prepare to get back into coaching. They talked to me about his desire to be at UNLV, his desire to restore. You have to think he grew up kind of in the 90s. I mean, he was a little older, but he grew up with the glory years of Tark, and he has a real desire and respect for UNLV's history in a way that you don't see. I'm not saying that Kevin Kruger didn't have that kind of respect too, but Pastner is a guy with deep ties, with deep connections in the college basketball world. And these people basically vouched for Josh Pastner in ways that I haven't seen before. I never once had somebody reach out to me and vouch for Kevin Kruger like people are vouched for Josh Pastner. And that's not because Kevin Kruger isn't a very nice man, and it wasn't just as a human being, it was as a basketball coach. They said, this guy can coach. He got screwed over at Georgia Tech. Memphis, look at Memphis since Josh Pastner left. Have they been any better than when he was there? No, they haven't. Has Georgia Tech all of a sudden turned into an incredible job since Josh Pastner left? No. So, that doesn't change the reservations that I have about Josh Pastner, but it does give me a better understanding of who he is as a coach and as a human being, and what his vision and desires are for the UNLV job. The next piece of information, and again, guys, I'm not a reporter. The administration doesn't like me very much mostly because of the Pac-12 stuff, but for other reasons too. I was told a little bit about the hiring process and about Eric Harper specifically. Now, this came from a pretty good source, guys. I'm not going to lie. A very strong source. Yes, and Tavon says, I think the fact Josh Pastner wants to be the Runnin' Rebel head coach, guys. This is his place. Now, Kevin Kruger wanted that too, but Josh Pastner has a lot more experience and success than Kevin Kruger did. And I think that my initial, his speech had more energy than Kruger's entire career. Yeah. You know who he kind of reminds me of a little bit? Dan Mullen. Obviously he doesn't have the resume Dan Mullen did, but he kind of has that Dan Mullen energy. He killed that press conference. I came away absolutely, and when I went up and talked to him, he was giving time to individuals though. He was talking to everybody in that room that was willing to go up to him and talk to him, which says a lot about him to me as a coach and as a human being. So I was told a little bit about what was going on inside Harper's office. Now, you don't have to believe me, but I was told a little bit by somebody in the know about this. Eric Harper really likes Josh Pastner, really does. Josh Pastner was one of the people that Eric Harper had targeted basically from the beginning. Now, obviously, there were other candidates for the job. And Eric Harper recognized that you got to take a swill at Will. You got to take a swing at Will Wade if you can try and go get him. But Eric Harper and Josh Pastner have deep connections that go back a long way. And when UNLV lost out on Brian Hodgson and didn't get Eric Owen, Eric Harper was not like mad to see those other guys not get the job. Not that he didn't think they could do a good job, but Pastner was like Eric Harper's guy from the beginning. And other parties were trying to push for other hires. Whereas in Eric Harper's head, Pastner was the guy. I'm not saying that Eric Harper wouldn't have hired other people before Pastner, but Eric Harper liked Pastner from the beginning and was ecstatic when all that Brian Hodgson crap ended. Not that he didn't want to hire Brian Hodgson, but was ecstatic that he was able to hire Josh Pastner. Eric Harper, the same guy that locked in on Barry Odom, who people have said, oh, Barry Odom, 25 and 25 in the SEC. Pastner has a better resume than him. I don't really believe that, but I don't really believe. I think Barry Odom had a pretty good resume coming into the UNLV job. But fair comment. Pastner's Eric Harper's guy. Eric Harper is ecstatic that Josh Pastner is the head coach, and Eric Harper in the past has identified coaching talent and turned around one of the worst football programs in America and turned it into a program that last year was a game away from making the college football playoff. So, do we know who Bill Paulus wanted? I'm not going to speak about what I'm not going to speak about what Bill Paulus wanted. He would have to speak for himself on that. Okay, sorry. So Eric Harper is ecstatic with Josh Pastner, and Eric Harper turned around UNLV football. And Eric Harper wanted Josh Pastner from the beginning. This was not seen as like a backup to a backup to a backup to Eric Harper. And Eric Harper deserves a little bit of a benefit of the doubt here in terms of hiring coaches because of what he did for football. And so Martin says, I showed him pictures of my father and Tark together from back in the day and told him that I hope he could get us back to something similar to those days. Yeah, I mean, he was all over this press conference trying to give everybody the hope and the excitement that UNLV basketball needs. And so what will it take? So just in summation, people that haven't just sworn for Josh Pastner, the human being, but they've also claimed that people that know basketball and know, national basketball, people have vouched for him as a coach, not just as a recruiter or a human being, but as a coach. So I started to dig in a little bit to Josh Pastner's career. I watched a few games of when Josh Pastner coached. I watched 3 or 4 games for his time at Georgia Tech. Went back all the way back to his time at Memphis and watched some of those games. And I spent a lot of time. Anyone else not able to see the live chat? Yeah, guys, the live chat is, I can see all this stuff being chatted in here, but the live chat is always incredibly buggy. And so I apologize for that. I don't really know how to fix it. I'm going to try and revamp the Let's Run podcast kind of interface for next year, but I will do the best that I can. And so what will it take for Josh Pastner to be successful at UNLV? What's it going to take? And I thought that we would dive back into the Let's Run classroom here. And I thought we'd go over it point by point so that people could, follow it a little closely, because I put together a little plan, and I kind of want to share it with you guys. So let's dive into the Kelly classroom, the Let's Run classroom here. And let's get rolling about how Josh Pastner is going to win here. So key number 1 for Josh Pastner, and part of the reason why I think, and again, while I still have my reservations about his coaching career, I want this podcast to give you hope as to why Josh Pastner is the guy that's going to turn around this program. And so key number 1, and this was talked about in the press conference, is NIL. Pastner will have to focus his entire life on NIL. I think that a GM for NIL would be really good for UNLV for football and basketball. I don't know if they have plans to. I don't know if they have plans to do one, but I know that Josh Pastner is really focused in, and this is through multiple sources, including just interviews of him. He has dedicated the last 2 years to analyzing college basketball, because you have to understand that when he was at Georgia Tech, the NIL game had not really taken off yet. And Josh Pastner brings with him a little bit of money in the NIL space. Now, I don't know how much. I don't know. Yeah, you're right, Blur. There is a GM for football. There should be one for basketball too. I don't know if they're planning on that, but if they announce a GM for basketball, that's going to be good. How much money does it take in NIL to put together a roster that can win in the Mountain West? The number that's been floated to me is around $2 to $3 million. If UNLV wants to win in the Mountain West next year, $2 to $3 million is the goal. Now, how much was Kevin Kruger working with? Kevin Kruger's roster last year had around $1 million to work with in NIL. That's what's been reported. I don't have that number independently confirmed, but Josh Pastner's goal is to get that number from $1 million to $2 to $3 million. UNLV is not spending an exorbitant amount on hiring Josh Pastner. Josh Pastner did not have the type of buyout. There was still a buyout with Georgia Tech, but UNLV was able to offset that a little bit by bringing down Josh Pastner's salary for his first year. But UNLV, and George Cole says it best here, Pastner will know how to raise money. He will. Josh Pastner has deep connections on the West Coast through his time at Arizona. His father was one of the leaders of the AAU circuit. He has ties to some people with some real finances. The target is probably $3 million to build a roster. Key number one for Josh Pastner isn't even, I believe he was extended. Martin says, how is there a buyout from Georgia Tech when he's been gone for 2 years? I believe he was fired with 3 years left on his contract. And so next year, the 25-26 season was the last year of Josh Pastner's deal. And so that's why there's still a buyout. And UNLV is paying the rest of that buyout, which is not very much at this point, and then subsidizing that with a smaller first-year salary of $500,000 for Pastner. And so, when you see people say his salary is basically going to be in $1.2 or $1.3 million in terms of the money that he receives. And that $500,000 number, while it makes the average look lower, it's a little deceptive. So Kevin Kruger had $1 million to work with. Josh Pastner, we think, is going to be able to get to $2 to $3 million. Sorry, is there going to be a class in here in a minute? No? Okay, I'm just doing a podcast, so just so you know. It'll be another like 20, 30 minutes at least. And so, sorry, my apologies. I'm in a classroom down here at UNLV, and so somebody just came in. I just want to make sure that they're okay. And so Kevin Kruger wasn't really seen as a big NIL guy, and Josh Pastner will be. Josh Pastner will bring in not only money from the surrounding community. He's going to try and fundraise his butt off. He's a big fundraiser. Kevin Kruger did not have the reputation as being a massive NIL fundraiser. And Josh Pastner will focus on NIL. And NIL, notice that I put it first. NIL is actually more important than the X's and O's. It is. When you look at the Sweet 16, these teams that are in the NCAA tournament that are still there, the common denominator amongst all of them is they have high NIL budgets. You get college basketball, the recruiting era, it's kind of in the past. There's no money under the table payments anymore. Your ability to win in college basketball is almost entirely dictated by how much NIL can you get. And Pastner as a coach has legitimate NIL ties already and has shown a commitment to NIL that I think that Kevin Kruger never really had. Now, this doesn't mean Kevin Kruger didn't ignore NIL, but Josh Pastner will be more equipped in the NIL era than Kevin Kruger. So that's key number one. Key number two, and this is going to go into the X's and O's a little bit, so I hope you can bear with me here. But key number two for me is modernize style of play. Let's dive into the KenPom numbers here, and look at something very important here. So Josh Pastner's teams, you look at their records, not always spectacular. Pretty often, his offensive numbers were pretty good. But there's one thing that really stuck out to me when I was going over all of the times that Josh Pastner's been a head coach. And it's actually this category right here, 3-pointers attempted. What this means is how many threes is your school taking? Josh Pastner has, in the past, taken a low number of threes as a head coach. His teams have not taken a lot of threes. And I think getting this number, 135, they took the 135th most threes in the country, 251, 202, 324, 303. That means his teams have not been taking a lot of three-pointers. They haven't been generating a lot of three-pointers. And I think it's going to be important for Josh to really modernize his approach to offense. Now, that doesn't mean it all has to come from him. I think a lot of it can come from hiring good offensive minds to kind of build his offense and to help, generate the type of offense that can score enough in the modern era of basketball. But if Josh wants to be successful, he's going to have to take and make more three-pointers. Something else I noticed with Josh, when I was going through his teams, let's look at the defensive numbers here. He has fielded some excellent defenses. Not always. But the best defense that he ever had was actually in his first season at Georgia Tech, the 6th-ranked defense in America. That team ended up losing in the NIT final, but they were a very good team. And when I was looking at Pastner as a defensive coach, I saw a lot of gimmicky type defenses. He was running amoeba style, box and one style. He was really thinking outside of the box as a defensive coach. And I think that he's going to have to modernize that approach a little bit because you see his defenses, if you look at the numbers right here, his defenses really kind of fell off his last couple of years at Georgia Tech. So I think he's going to have to be adaptable and modern in his defensive approach. And so, modernize his coaching style, modernize his style of play. It doesn't have to be all done by him, but he's going to have to be able to be in the modern age of college basketball because he's been out of the game for a couple of years. Hopefully he's been able to learn. And I think he's going to be able to do that. And by all accounts, that's his goal. Step number 3 is engage with the community. What does that mean? Barry Odom, can I explain his Princeton offense? The Princeton offense is, it has a lot of good principles. If you watch a school like Colorado State play, the Princeton offense does not necessarily have to be an old, modern, irrelevant, constrictive style offense. The Princeton offense can be a very modern, up-tempo, shoot a lot of threes type offense. So what I would say is, Pastner has run a heavy motion style offense in the past, which I would think that he learned from his time under Lute Olson at Arizona. And Coach Cal used to run this kind of offense as well, and he was on. He does have experience with Coach Cal, but I think he needs to modernize it. And I think using Colorado State as an example is a good way that Pastner can update and modernize the Princeton offense. And yeah, here you go, Banana Man. Josh Pastner has come in with a mandate, his own mandate, but also a mandate from the school to engage with local community, to engage with alumni, and to really get his teeth into local UNLV, local Las Vegas stuff. Now, Kevin Kruger did recruit locally as well, but I think that sometimes there was an aversion to aspects of the city of Las Vegas with Kevin Kruger. Um, and I think maybe Kevin was a little bit stubborn with how he approached his approach to the community. But I think a great example of this is a guy like Barry Odom. Barry Odom made a real effort to get involved, with people from the Raiders. He secured fundraising, a donation from the Raiders to UNLV football. He did that bull riding thing. He really seemed to make a concerted effort to engage with the local community in a way that was really remarkable. And I think that following both Dan Mullen and Barry Odom, their approach to engaging with the community, and I don't want to act like Kevin Kruger didn't try. Kevin Kruger certainly did, but he he failed ultimately to connect with past alumni in a real and constructive way. And so I think engaging with the community is going to have to be key for Josh Pastner to have success here. And the last thing that I would say is staff, staff, staff. What do I mean by that? Josh Pastner has to have an outstanding supporting staff around him. A couple people that I would love to see on Josh Pastner's staff is I would love to see him retain Barrett Peary. Coach Peary has previous head coaching experience. He wants UNLV. He's got all those same kind of goals and aspirations as Coach Pastner does. And Barrett Peary is a person that other programs are going to want. He's an outstanding recruiter. He's a good head coach. And as an assistant coach, I think he adds a level of credibility and continuity from the Kevin Kruger era, maybe keeping the things that were working with the Kevin Kruger era while discarding what wasn't. I think retaining Barrett Peary is key, whether we have to give him a raise, whether we have to work with him to keep him in the Las Vegas community. Dave Rice, associate head coach. I don't think that Dave will ever come back to UNLV. Although if I was UNLV, I would be doing everything I can to get that man back to UNLV in any form. And honestly, I wasn't even opposed to him being a head coach at UNLV again. But anything that you can do to mend the relationship with Dave Rice is pivotal. Dave Rice is a good man, Las Vegas royalty in my eyes, and anything that UNLV can do to try and mend that relationship with him, even though, considering what UNLV did to him, I think it was completely unfair at the time. But I would love to see Dave Rice involved in UNLV hoops again. But Dave Rice has a good thing going up there in Salt Lake, so you kind of also want to be respectful of that. Bring on Wink Adams or Anthony Marshall. Yeah, both Wink and Anthony Marshall have been talking online about how they'd love to be involved in UNLV hoops. I hope that UNLV can think outside the box a little bit and bring those guys in, even if it's not in like a job capacity. I would just love to see those guys be around. They're the guys from my childhood. I grew up on the Lon Kruger, Dave Rice era of Running Rebel hoops. That's what made me love this program. And I would just love to see them involved somehow. I would love to see one former Running Rebel on the staff as a player. I want to see that. I think that's a very good idea. Keefe is probably the biggest one. In case you didn't know, Keefe, previous Running Rebel player, he's a guy that has a lot of success in the NIL era. I think Dickel is probably not a bad idea too. There's a lot of people that that could be chosen, but I think that getting a previous Running Rebel on the staff is a good idea, and at the very least, get them around the program a little bit more. I would just love to see Running Rebel greats all over UNLV stuff and all over UNLV social media. I think that reaching out to them and bringing them in is pivotal. I want to make sure I'm not missing any comments because I see that Ravi was commenting up here. I'd love to help you connect the dots. And I don't know if that's recent, but yeah, Pastner won't hire any locals. I hope that he does. And even if he doesn't, even if he doesn't hire them officially on the staff, I'm not saying that he should hire people that aren't credited and aren't experienced. I would just love to see him get these guys involved in any way that's reasonable. NIL is the key. NIL is the key. And so staff, keep Barrett Peary in. Bring in former Running Rebels with legit coaching experience And former players that even don't have coaching experience, I hope that they can be involved in the program somehow in a way that's more substantial than how they were involved at UNLV previously. So, kind of what's my last? I wanted to talk briefly about the Let's Run podcast. Um, Actually, no. Let's predict what the next 24 months of Run and Rebel hoops are going to look like. Listen, if I was a betting man and I had somebody, and I did do this, I had somebody bet me, will UNLV be in the NCAA tournament in the next 24 months? My answer, if I was a betting man, would be 35, 30 to 40% chance that's going to happen. It's a steep road. It's a steep road. Martin asks, is there any chance that Pastner retains some of the guys that entered the portal? It depends on which ones. I don't think that, for example, DJ is sticking around. I don't know that Rob is sticking around, but if I was Pastner, my number one priority would probably be keeping Jaden Henley in the fold. I think he's a great player, but you just don't know. And there were a lot of former players at the press conference, or current players at the press conference today: Brooklyn Hicks, Jalen Bedford. Among others, Jacob Benarby was there, Jace Whiting was there. I think retaining those players is key. I don't think the DJ is going to stick around, and I don't know that Jaden Henley is going to stick around, but that's just a guess on my part. So, what do I think the next 24 months of UNLV is going to look like? I mean, if I had to put odds on it, I'd say 30 to 40% chance that we're back in the NCAA tournament in the next 2 years. And we'll know more. We'll know more once we know what kind of roster Josh Pastner is putting together. We're going to know how good this team is by how much NIL the school is throwing around in the transfer portal. You don't have to wait until November to know whether Pastner has this program trending in the right direction. You will know in the next month or two, and the next month really, because we'll know who Pastner has targeted as recruits in the transfer portal. NIL is everything. NIL is everything. We are looking for juniors and seniors with experience to come in to UNLV and have success immediately. So if you start to see great headlines, UNLV lands this big recruit, who had this big of an NIL, that's a very good sign. You don't have to wait till November to know how this is going to go. We're going to know pretty soon. And I will feel like I can give a better answer to that, what the next 2 years are going to look like a month and a half or so from now. And I will. I'll still be doing podcasts. So I think that Pastner has a chance. He's got a tough hill to climb, but he's a guy that can do it. And I just want to say publicly, despite all of my, doubting and despite my hesitation, Josh Pastner is capable of doing this, and I believe in him. And as a fan, I will be rooting for him and supporting him every way that I know how. So I kind of wanted to close on talking about what the Let's Run podcast is and what it isn't, and what its goals are. Listen, guys, I'm not a member of the media. This is a part-time thing for me. I don't make money off of this, as I've said a million times. And I am a fan first. I'm not a professional first. I'm a fan first. Perhaps I need to switch this into more of a professional thing. Perhaps I need to start bringing on advertisers. Perhaps I need to start, looking for people to support the show monetarily so that I can cover the team better. But at this point in time, I'm just a fan. And look, I am apt to overreaction. I am apt to the Let's Run podcast is the people's podcast, and I want it to be. That's the goal of it. So if you have a problem with something that I say, reach out to me. I'll talk to you about it. I will meet you at each game. I want every single Rebel fan that listens to this show to feel like they have a direct line with me, because they do. All you have to do is reach out. And I will talk to you. And perhaps I need to make this show a bit more professional and a bit less fan, because there's just no other UNLV content. And I think that there's a real appetite and hunger, especially coming into the Dan Mullen era. But if you disagree with me, please just DM me. DM me. We can talk in mentions too, but DMing is always better. I'll meet with you at a game, and the goal of the Let's Run podcast is to be a fan podcast. That's all I can say. And I appreciate you, Martin. I appreciate you too. I appreciate you a lot, man. So Josh Pastner can do this job. The Let's Run podcast supports Josh Pastner. I support Josh Pastner. I'm going to do everything in my power to give this guy as good of a shot as he can get as a head coach. And I think that he will get UNLV. I have faith that he will get UNLV back to the NCAA tournament. And I think that, with a good NIL push, which we'll know pretty soon if he has or not, that he can do it even next year. And I think that's what it's going to take to get this program back. Josh Pastner as a media guy, he's been doing media appearances everywhere. Like Dan Mullen, those media connections go a long way. And ultimately, I think that Pastner is a guy that can do the job. And we as fans, regardless of how we got here, we as fans, including myself, and I'm going to reach out to Coach Pastner and try and get him on the Let's Run podcast. And if you want to see him kind of confront what I said, that's fine. I'm going to try and reach out. I don't think he'll come on, but I guess we'll see. But Josh Pastner's a good man. He's a guy who's going to give it his all. And he's a guy, I said after the hire that, we should have just kept Kevin Kruger around if we were going to hire Josh Pastner. That was an insane thing to say. Josh Pastner is going to be better than Kevin Kruger was. And he certainly, we know what Kevin Kruger was. We don't know what Josh Pastner is going to be yet. And so ultimately, Coach has my full support. The Rebels have my full support. I am Team Pastner. I am Team Running Rebels. And yeah, that's all I got, guys. So I will probably have a show. I'm hoping to bring somebody on to kind of talk about UNLV basketball in general. We'll see if I can get a guest on. People in official Las Vegas media don't really seem to want to talk to me very much, which is fine. Hopefully I can get somebody like, and Martin, we don't have to wait 8 months. Football starts in 4 months or 5 months or whatever. And we have the portal and spring game and summer, and it'll all be good. And it's good to take a break. The Let's Run podcast will go on a pause while I study for the bar exam. Not that I won't have any presence at all, but I do have to pass the bar. And so, guys, I appreciate you checking out the show. I think Josh can absolutely do this job. And I'm going to try and help him in whatever small way that I can do it. And he's going to get UNLV basketball back to prominence. And we're going to help him do it, guys. We're going to help him do it. So everybody get behind this guy. He's our guy. He's a good man who wants to be here, who knows what UNLV basketball is and should be. And he can do it, guys. So get behind him. I appreciate you guys, and let's run, Rebels. Woo!